The story of our world is often told through the movement of green leaves, the flow of warm rivers, and the steady hum of life in the forests and fields. But there is one corner of the map where the colors soften into a palette of white, silver, and the deepest, most quiet blues. To find this place, we must let our minds travel downward, past the familiar shapes of the continents, past the bustling ports of the southern capes, and across a vast expanse of water that circles the bottom of the globe like a cold, protective ribbon. Here, at the very end of the earth, sits Antarctica, a continent that remained a mystery for almost all of human history. Tucked away behind walls of ice and curtains of falling snow, it is a place where time seems to slow down, where the air is so crisp and clean that every breath feels like a cool drink of water, and where the landscape is defined not by the things that are there, but by a beautiful, expansive stillness. For thousands of years, while civilizations rose and fell, while great cities were built and ancient forests were explored, this frozen land remained unseen and untouched, a silent kingdom of ice waiting at the edge of the world. Imagine for a moment the maps of the old world, drawn on thick parchment with ink that smelled of oak gall and iron. In those days, the bottom of the map was often left blank, or perhaps filled with the imaginative sketches of artists who dreamed of a great southern land that balanced the weight of the north. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, and they imagined it as a place of warm breezes and strange birds, never suspecting that the reality was something far more serene and crystalline. The sailors of the past would look toward the southern horizon and see only the gray, rolling waves of the southern ocean, a place where the wind sings a low, steady note and the mist clings to the surface of the water like a soft woolen blanket. They knew there was something there, a presence felt in the sudden drop in temperature and the appearance of flat-topped icebergs that drifted north like wandering mountains. But the continent itself remained a ghost, hidden behind a veil of fog and the shimmering light of the polar sun. To understand why this was the last place mapped, we must think about the nature of the ice itself, which is not just frozen water but a living, moving architecture that guards the land. As a ship travels south, the water begins to change, growing thicker and more viscous as small crystals of ice, known as frasil, begin to form on the surface, looking like delicate lily pads or scattered petals. These crystals join together to form pancakes of ice, which gently bump against one another with a soft, rhythmic clinking sound like the chiming of distant bells. Eventually, these pieces fuse into a solid sheet of pack ice, a vast and shifting mosaic that stretches as far as the eye can see. This was the first barrier that kept the world away, a white doorstep that required patience and a quiet heart to cross. The early explorers would sit on their wooden decks, wrapped in heavy wool coats that smelled of lanolin and wood smoke, watching the way the light played across the frozen sea, turning the white expanses into shades of lavender, peach and pale gold as the sun hovered low near the horizon. There is a particular kind of light in the far south, a soft and diffused glow that feels as though it is coming from the ground itself rather than the sky. Because the sun never rises very high, the shadows are long and gentle, stretching across the snow in hues of deep sapphire and charcoal. In this light, the mountains of the Antarctic Peninsula appear not as harsh peaks, but as soft, rounded shoulders draped in a heavy quilt of ancient snow. When the first ships finally drew close enough to see the land, the men on board did not see forests or smoke from fires, but a world made entirely of minerals and water. They saw glaciers that flowed like slow, frozen rivers into the sea, their edges glowing with an inner blue light that seemed to hold the secrets of 1,000,000 years. The air here carries no scent of earth or growing things. Instead, it smells of nothing at all. A purity that is so absolute it feels like a physical presence against the skin. As we move deeper into the story of this mapping, we find that it was a process of slow observation and quiet waiting. Mapping Antarctica was not about rushing across the land, but about hovering at its edges, tracing the line where the white ice meets the dark water. The explorers would spend weeks navigating the lights, small lanes of open water that wind through the pack ice like silver threads. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, listening to the sound of the hull brushing against the slush, a sound like the tearing of silk. Every mile gained was a victory of patience. They would stand at the bow, peering through the mist, waiting for the moment when the clouds would part to reveal a new headland or a hidden bay. These features were not named for conquest, but for the people back home, for the ships that carried them, and for the quiet moments of discovery that happened in the stillness of the polar afternoon. The interior of the continent remained a mystery even longer. A vast plateau of ice that rises thousands of feet into the air. If you were to stand in the center of this land, you would see a horizon that is perfectly flat and white in every direction. A circle of purity that makes the world feel very large and oneself feel very small and peaceful. The snow here is not like the soft, wet snow of the north. It is dry and fine, like powdered sugar, and it squeaks softly underfoot. The wind has carved the surface into beautiful, undulating ridges called sastrugi, which look like frozen waves on a motionless sea. To map this interior was to learn the language of the wind and the patterns of the stars, which shine with a steady, unblinking brilliance in the thin, dry air. There is no sound here except for the breath of the wind and the occasional deep groan of the ice as it settles under its own immense weight. A sound that reminds us that the continent is a living, breathing entity. In the early days of mapping, the tools were simple and tactile. There were sextants made of polished brass that felt cool and heavy in the hand, and chronometers that ticked with a rhythmic, comforting heartbeat in the quiet of the cabin. The maps were drawn by hand on heavy paper, the ink flowing slowly in the cold air, recording the curves of the coastline and the height of the icy cliffs. There is a gentleness in these old maps, a sense of wonder in the way the lines trace the unknown. They show us a world being revealed one small piece at a time, like a photograph slowly developing in a darkroom. The people who drew them were not looking for gold or spices, but for knowledge, for the simple satisfaction of knowing where the world ended and the great silence began. The mapping of Antarctica also meant understanding the life that calls this cold place home. Along the fringes of the ice, there are creatures that move with a quiet purpose, perfectly adapted to the stillness. There are the seals with their large, dark eyes and thick coats of fur, who haul themselves onto the ice to sleep in the sun, their breathing deep and rhythmic. There are the penguins who waddle across the snow with a charming, busy energy, their black and white feathers sleek and waterproof. And in the water, there are the great whales, whose distant spouts look like puffs of white smoke against the gray sea. These animals were the first inhabitants of the mapped lands, and they watched the arrival of the wooden ships with a calm curiosity, their presence a reminder that even in the coldest reaches of the earth, life finds a way to exist in harmony with the environment. As the years passed and the maps became more complete, the mystery of Antarctica did not fade, but rather deepened. We began to understand that this continent is the heartbeat of the world's climate, a great white engine that helps to keep the planet cool and the oceans moving. The ice that covers the land is miles thick in some places, a heavy, cold blanket that has rested there for eons. Beneath this ice lie hidden lakes and ancient mountains, a whole world that remains tucked away, protected from the passage of time. The mapping of the surface was only the beginning of our acquaintance with this place, a gentle introduction to a land that asks for nothing but to be left in its magnificent, icy solitude. Now, as we think about those early maps, we can see how they represent a bridge between the known and the unknown. They are documents of human curiosity, but also of human respect for the power and beauty of nature. The lines on the paper are soft and tentative, acknowledging that the ice is always changing, always shifting, and that a map of Antarctica is a map of a moment in time. The continent does not belong to any one nation or any one person. It belongs to the world, a shared sanctuary of ice and light that remains the most peaceful place on Earth. It is a land where the air is still, where the snow is white, and where the only clock is the slow movement of the glaciers toward the sea. As we settle into the quiet of this story, we can imagine the smell of the cold air, a scent that is crisp and metallic, like the taste of a silver spoon. We can feel the stillness of the landscape, a silence so deep that you can almost hear the stars twinkling in the dark velvet of the polar night. The maps are finished now, the coastlines traced and the mountains named, but the spirit of the place remains unchanged. It is still the last place, the quiet place, the white kingdom at the bottom of the map where the world goes to be still. The work of the early mappers was a labor of love and patience, a slow gathering of details that allowed the rest of the world to see what lay beyond the southern horizon. They brought back stories of icebergs that glowed like emeralds in the twilight, and of nights where the sky was filled with the dancing green and purple lights of the aurora, a silent symphony of color that draped across the heavens like silk curtains. These sights were the reward for the long journeys and the quiet days spent waiting for the fog to clear. They found a world that was not harsh, but simply different, a place that operated on a scale of time that was far longer than a human life. In the cabins of the ships, under the glow of a small oil lamp, the mappers would sit and refine their sketches. The room would be warm, the air thick with the smell of tea and old paper, while outside the wind would whistle softly through the rigging. There was a sense of profound peace in this work, a feeling of being at the very edge of existence, where the only things that mattered were the accuracy of a line and the steady ticking of the clock. They were the scribes of the ice, recording the geometry of a world that few would ever see with their own eyes. Their maps were not just tools for navigation. but invitations to dream about the vast, white spaces that lay at the heart of the continent. As the maps grew more detailed, the blank spaces on the globe began to fill in. But the character of Antarctica remained one of solitude and grace. Even today, when we look at satellite images of the continent, we see the same swirling patterns of ice and the same deep blues of the surrounding ocean. The mapping of this land was a gentle process, a slow unfolding of a secret that the Earth had kept for millions of years. It taught us that there are still places in the world where the natural order remains undisturbed, where the ice and the wind are the only masters, and where the passage of time is marked not by hours, but by the slow, majestic flow of the glaciers. The story of the mapping of Antarctica is a story of coming to know a friend. It began with fear and myths, moved into curiosity and exploration, and finally settled into a deep and lasting respect. We have learned to listen to the ice, to understand its movements, and to appreciate the delicate balance that allows this frozen world to exist. The maps are a testament to our desire to understand our home, to reach out into the unknown and find beauty in the most remote corners of the earth. They remind us that even in the vastness of the universe, there are places of profound stillness and peace that waiting for us to simply sit and observe. As we think about the wide expanse of the continent, we can feel our own thoughts slowing down, matching the pace of the drifting ice. The world of noise and hurry feels very far away, replaced by the soft rhythm of the polar wind and the gentle creak of the ice shelf. The map is complete, the lines are drawn, and the continent sits in its quiet majesty, a white jewel at the end of the world. The exploration of this place was never about conquering it, but about learning how to be a guest in a land that belongs to the wind and the snow. The light is fading now on the Antarctic Peninsula, the sun dipping just below the horizon to leave a sky of deep indigo and violet. The icebergs are dark shapes against the water, and the seals have tucked their flippers close to their bodies, drifting into a deep and peaceful sleep on their floating rafts of ice. The continent is settling in for the long, quiet night, a time of rest and reflection that lasts for months. In this stillness, the work of the mappers feels like a quiet conversation between the land and the people who sought to understand it. A bridge built of paper and ink that connects us to the farthest reaches of our world. The journey through the history of this mapping brings us to a place of deep calm. We have traveled across the rolling waves, through the clinking pack ice, and onto the high, white plateau. We have seen the light change from gold to sapphire, and we have felt the purity of the air. The story of the last place mapped is not a story of struggle, but a story of discovery, a gentle unveiling of a world that reminds us of the beauty of simplicity and the power of silence. As we leave the mappers at their desks and the ships in their quiet bays, we carry with us the peace of the white continent, a stillness that resides at the very bottom of the world and in the quiet corners of our own minds. The ice continues its slow journey toward the sea, a movement so gradual it is almost imperceptible, like the growth of a tree or the cooling of the earth at night. The maps are tucked away in drawers, their edges softening with age, while the land they describe remains as vibrant and mysterious as ever. There is a comfort in knowing that such a place exists, a vast sanctuary of ice that remains largely as it was when the first explorers arrived. It is a reminder that there is always more to learn, more to see, and more to appreciate in the quiet, hidden places of our world. As we transition from the history of the maps to the physical reality of the ice itself, we move from the world of human endeavor into the world of natural forces. The next part of our journey will take us deeper into the heart of the ice, exploring the textures and the sounds of the great glaciers that cover the land. We will listen to the way the ice speaks, a low and ancient language that tells the story of the Earth's past. But for now, we simply rest in the knowledge that the map is whole. The continent is known, and the great southern silence is a place of peace and enduring beauty. The fire in the hearth is burning low. The room is warm and still, and the story of the ice continues to flow like a slow, silver river through our thoughts, leading us toward a deeper understanding of the white world that stretches out in every direction. A vast and silent kingdom where time seems to hold its breath. As we move deeper into this landscape, we find ourselves standing upon a surface that is not merely ground, but a monumental accumulation of history, layer upon soft layer of frozen memory reaching down into the dark earth. Beneath your feet, if you were to stand in the center of this great white expanse, there is a depth so profound that it defies the simple logic of the senses. Imagine a weight that is not heavy, but stabilizing, a blanket of ice 2 miles thick, pressing down with a slow and rhythmic gravity that has shaped the very crust of the planet. It is a quiet architecture, built not of stone or steel, but of individual snowflakes, each one a tiny, hexagonal star that fell from a pale sky thousands upon thousands of years ago. When you look across the horizon, the ice appears as a flat and infinite sea, frozen in a moment of perfect stillness. But beneath that calm surface lies a vertical journey through time. The air here is so dry that it feels like silk against the skin, and the silence is so complete that you can almost hear the soft, crystalline structure of the snow settling under its own weight. Each foot of depth represents a season, a year, a century, preserved in a state of absolute purity. The top layer is soft and powdery, a fine dust of diamonds that dances in the low light of a sun that never truly sets. But as you descend in your mind, the pressure of the ages begins to transform the snow. It loses its air, it loses its fluff, and it becomes something dense and translucent, a deep, resonant blue that glows with a light from within. This is the heart of the ice, a place where the atmosphere of the ancient world is trapped in tiny, microscopic bubbles. If you were to hold a piece of this deep ice in your hand, you would be holding air that was breathed by creatures long gone, air that felt the warmth of fires from the very first civilizations. It is a library of the world's breath, kept safe in a cold, blue vault. The light that filters down through these 2 miles of frozen water is soft and ethereal, shifting from the brilliant white of the surface to a pale turquoise, and finally to a navy so dark it feels like the onset of a dreamless sleep. There is no sound here, only the immense, slow pulse of the continent as it flows, ever so slightly toward the distant sea. The weight of this ice is so great that it has pushed the land beneath it down, bowing the rocky spine of the continent into the mantle of the earth. It is a gentle pressure, a slow-motion conversation between the sky and the stone. You might imagine the smell of the air at the very bottom, where the ice meets the ancient rock. It is a scent of cold minerals and damp earth, a hidden world that has not seen the sun for millions of years. Here in the darkness there are lakes of liquid water, kept thawed by the warmth of the Earth's core and the insulating blanket of the ice above. These subglacial lakes are like secret rooms in a vast mansion, still and undisturbed, where the water is as clear as glass and the passage of time has no meaning. As we drift across the surface, the texture of the ice changes. In some places, the wind has carved the snow into long, flowing ridges called sastrugi, which look like the frozen waves of a white ocean. They are smooth and polished, catching the golden light of the afternoon in a way that makes the ground look like hammered silver. Walking across them would be a slow, rhythmic process, a steady crunch of boots on crust, a sound that is both lonely and deeply comforting. The wind here does not howl. It whispers a long and steady breath that carries no dust, no pollen, no scent of the modern world. It is the cleanest air on earth, a breath of pure clarity that fills the lungs and settles the mind. The scale of this ice is difficult to grasp, yet it invites a sense of profound peace. To think of 2 miles of solid water is to think of a reservoir of stillness that anchors the entire globe. It acts as a great white mirror, reflecting the sun's energy back into space, keeping the world cool and balanced. It is a guardian of the climate, a silent sentinel that watches over the turning of the seasons. The ice does not hurry. It moves at the pace of a glacier, a few inches a day, a slow and deliberate journey from the high interior to the rugged coast. It is a movement so gradual that it feels like stillness, a reminder that there is beauty in patience and strength in endurance. In the height of the southern summer, the sun circles the sky in a low, lazy loop, never dipping below the horizon. The light is constant, but it changes character as the hours pass. In the morning, it is a crisp, cool yellow that makes the ice sparkle like a field of crushed pearls. By midday, it is a brilliant, blinding white that dissolves the horizon into a haze of light. And in the evening, the sun hangs low, casting long, soft shadows of violet and blue across the snow, turning the 2-mile depth into a glowing lantern of pastel hues. There is no urgency in this light. It simply exists, bathing the world in a soft, perpetual glow that encourages the eyes to close and the thoughts to wander. We might imagine the explorers who first stood upon this ice, men who traveled not with the speed of engines, but with the steady pace of their own footsteps. They spoke of the ice as a living thing, a presence that commanded respect and offered a strange, haunting kind of companionship. Their journals are filled with descriptions of the colors they saw, not just white but cream, and rose and a green as pale as a young leaf. They lived in small, sturdy tents, listening to the fabric flutter in the breeze, while beneath them the 2 miles of ice stood as a solid and unwavering foundation. Their lives were defined by the simple logistics of warmth and movement, the careful measurement of fuel, the slow boiling of water, the comfort of a heavy wool blanket at the end of a long day. The ice provides a sense of enclosure. Despite its vastness, it creates a world where the complexities of life are stripped away, leaving only the essential elements of light, air, and cold. There is a profound simplicity in a landscape where the only colors are those of the sky and the snow. It allows the mind to rest, to stop searching for patterns and instead to simply float upon the surface of the present moment. The depth of the ice is a physical manifestation of quietude, a heavy, cold peace that smothers the noise of the distant world. It is a place where the soul can stretch out and find its own level, much like the ice itself, which finds its way into every valley and crevice of the land beneath. As the sun moves in its slow circle, the temperature remains steady, a consistent and predictable cold that feels like a physical presence. It is a dry cold, one that does not bite but rather envelops, a bracing reminder of the purity of this environment. The crystals of the snow are so dry they do not stick together. They flow like sand through the fingers, a fine white grain that has been polished by the wind. This is the dust of the stars, fallen to earth and gathered in a great, silent heap. To contemplate this depth is to contemplate the endurance of the earth, the way it gathers its history and holds it close, protected by the cold and the distance. Below the surface, the layers of ice are not uniform. They are marked by the passage of time, by years of heavy snowfall and years of thin, shimmering frost. There are layers that contain the ash of distant volcanoes, thin gray ribbons of dust that tell stories of eruptions from thousands of miles away. These ribbons are like the rings of a tree, a chronological record of the planet's turbulent life, all smoothed over and silenced by the ice. The volcanoes may have roared, but here their memory is a soft, silent line in a blue wall of ice. It is a place where even the most violent events of history are eventually turned into a quiet, frozen record. The pressure at the bottom of the 2-mile stack is immense, yet it is a creative force. It turns the ice into a substance that can flow, allowing it to navigate the mountains and valleys of the hidden continent. In some places, the ice must climb over subglacial mountain ranges as high as the Alps, moving with a slow and irresistible grace. It is a river of solid glass, carving the rock, polishing the stones, and shaping the future of the land. This movement is so slow that it would take a human lifetime to see a glacier move a significant distance. A pace that invites us to slow our own breathing, to match our rhythms to the long, slow pulse of the continent. As we linger in this thought of the deep ice, we feel the stillness of the air around us. The world above the ice is a place of thin atmosphere and bright stars, while the world within the ice is a place of dense color and ancient secrets. Both are equally calm, equally removed from the rush of everyday life. The ice is a bridge between the earth and the sky, a vast white transition zone where the two become one. The horizon is often lost in a soft whiteout, where the sky and the ground merge into a seamless sphere of light. In this space, there is no up or down, no near or far, only the gentle sensation of being suspended in a cool, white cloud. The silence of the interior is perhaps its most striking quality. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of a deep, resonant quiet that feels as thick as the ice itself. Occasionally, the ice might groan or crack, a low melodic sound that echoes through the depths, a reminder of the immense forces at play. But these sounds are rare, and they only serve to emphasize the stillness that follows. It is a quiet that invites reflection, a quiet that settles into the bones and husks away the distractions of the mind. In the heart of the continent, the silence is a companion, a soft blanket that covers everything in a layer of peace. Imagine the small, simple comforts of a camp on this ice. The hiss of a small stove, the smell of warm tea, the glow of a lantern against the yellow fabric of a tent. These small pockets of warmth are made all the more precious by the vastness of the cold outside. They are tiny islands of humanity in a sea of white. Inside the tent, the air is still and the sound of the wind is a distant hum. A lullaby that speaks of the great, empty spaces beyond the walls. The contrast between the fragile warmth of the camp and the monumental cold of the ice creates a sense of safety, a feeling of being tucked away in a secret corner of the world. The ice 2 miles thick is not a barrier, but a sanctuary. It protects the land beneath it, keeping it pristine and untouched. It preserves the air of the past, keeping it fresh for the scientists of the future. It is a storehouse of water, a frozen ocean that waits patiently for the turning of the ages. As we consider this, we feel a sense of gratitude for the cold, for the way it simplifies and sustains. The ice is a teacher of patience, a master of stillness and a guardian of the earth's most quiet moments. The transition from the high, flat plateaus to the edges of the continent is a slow and beautiful process. The ice begins to thin as it nears the coast, but it remains a formidable presence. It begins to fracture into crevices, deep blue fissures that reveal the inner light of the glacier. These cracks are like jewels in the white skin of the continent, glowing with a light that seems to come from the very center of the earth. They are beautiful and serene, places where the ice shows its strength and its fragility all at once. The movement toward the sea is a homecoming, a return to the water from which all this ice originally came. As the ice flows, it carries with it the weight of the sky and the history of the wind. It is a journey that takes thousands of years, a slow migration of molecules that have been held in a frozen embrace. The ice does not mourn the passage of time. It simply carries it, a silent witness to the changing world. And as we follow this flow, we find ourselves moving toward the edges of the continent, where the ice meets the sea in a spectacular display of white and blue. The transition is gentle, a slow melting of one state of being into another. The air begins to change as we approach the coast. It carries a hint of salt, a subtle shift in the moisture that suggests the presence of the open ocean. The silence is joined by the distant, rhythmic sound of waves, a low pulse that matches the heartbeat of the ice. The 2 miles of thickness begin to taper off, reaching out over the water in great, floating shelves that stretch for hundreds of miles. These ice shelves are the final expression of the continent's reach, a bridge between the solid earth and the fluid sea. They are flat and white, like the plateaus of the interior, but they rise and fall with the tide, a gentle heaving motion that speaks of the ocean's power. Beneath these floating shelves, the world is a dark and mysterious place. The water is cold and clear, and the underside of the ice is a landscape of ripples and caves. Sculpted by the currents, it is a hidden cathedral of blue, where the light of the sun filters through the thickness to create a dim, Emerald glow, here the life of the ocean begins to appear. Tiny, translucent creatures that drift in the cold currents, safe beneath the roof of ice. It is a place of profound calm, a world where the noise of the surface is completely extinguished. As we settle into the thought of this transition, the vast weight of the 2-mile-thick ice begins to feel like a comforting presence, a heavy quilt that has been pulled up to the chin. The cold is no longer a challenge, but a soothing balm, a way to quiet the senses and focus on the slow, steady rhythm of the natural world. The ice is a reminder that even the most monumental things are built of small, simple pieces, and that there is a deep, abiding strength in stillness. The story of the ice is a story of time, of patience, and of the quiet beauty that can be found in the most remote corners of the earth. The sun continues its slow, golden circle, casting a warm light over the frozen landscape. The shadows grow longer, the blues grow deeper, and the world seems to settle into a state of permanent repose. The ice, in all its vast thickness, remains a silent anchor, a white heart that beats with the slow rhythm of the ages. We are merely observers in this landscape, guests in a kingdom of cold and light, invited to share in its peace and to find our own stillness within its depths. The journey through the ice is a journey toward a deeper understanding of the Earth's quietest places. It is a path that leads away from the noise and the heat, toward a world of pure light and ancient air. As we drift further, the thickness of the ice becomes a metaphor for the depth of our own rest, a heavy and stabilizing force that allows us to let go of the day and sink into the cool, blue depths of reflection. The landscape is unchanging, yet it is always moving, a slow and graceful dance of molecules and light that continues long after we have closed our eyes. And so we find ourselves at the edge of a hidden world within the frozen world, a place where the logic of the ice seems to pause and hold its breath. We are moving away from the great white sheets and the towering shelves of the coast, traveling inward toward a landscape that feels as though it belongs to the soft, dusty surface of a distant moon. Here, nestled between the high, dark ridges of the Transantarctic mountains, lie the dry valleys, a vast stretch of earth that has not felt the damp touch of rain or the heavy blanket of snow for millions of years. It is a place of brown and gray, of deep ochre and pale sand, where the air is so pure and so thin that you can see for miles across the silent basins without a single cloud to interrupt the view. As we settle into this space, imagine the feeling of the wind, not as a sharp bite, but as a steady, patient presence, a sculptor that has been working on these rocks since the very beginning of time. The wind here is a traveler, descending from the high polar plateau and warming slightly as it drops, gathering speed and drying out every stray atom of moisture until the ground beneath is as parched as a summer garden at the end of a long, golden August. There is a profound stillness in the lack of ice, a different kind of quiet than the one we found on the glaciers. Here the earth is exposed, showing its ancient skin to the pale sun. You might notice the smell of the air, which carries no scent of pine or damp soil or salty sea, but instead smells of nothing at all, a vacuum of absolute freshness that feels light in the lungs. The ground is covered in a mosaic of stones, smoothed by the centuries into rounded shapes that fit perfectly in the palm of a hand. These are the ventifacts, rocks that have been polished by the blowing sand until they shine like jewels under the soft light. Some are shaped like wings, others like the curves of a resting animal, all of them standing as monuments to the slow, persistent rhythm of the wind. There is no rush here, no urgency to change, for in the dry valleys, 1,000 years is but a single afternoon, a quiet moment in a long, sun-drenched nap. As you walk in your mind across these valleys, you might see the strange patterns in the soil, hexagons and polygons etched into the ground by the freezing and thawing of the earth deep below. It is a geometry of nature, a gentle order that spreads out across the valley floor like a giant hand-woven rug. There are no trees to rustle, no grasses to sway, only the sound of your own heartbeat and the occasional low hum of the wind as it brushes against the ridges of the mountains. The mountains themselves are striped with layers of history, bands of dark volcanic rock and pale sandstone that tell a story of a time when the world was much warmer, though now they stand as silent sentinels over this kingdom of dust. The light here is different. Too, it does not reflect off white snow, but is absorbed by the dark stones, creating a warmth that you can almost feel radiating upward from the ground. A soft glow that lingers in the air long after the sun has dipped toward the horizon. In the center of one of these valleys lies a lake, but it is not a lake like any you have seen before. Its surface is capped with a thick, permanent lid of ice, clear as crystal and etched with white bubbles that look like frozen stars. Beneath this lid, the water is liquid and still, protected from the wind and the cold by its heavy glass ceiling. In the depths of these waters, life moves at a pace so slow it is almost indistinguishable from rest. Tiny mats of algae, colored in shades of orange and deep green, sway gently in the dark, drawing what little energy they need from the faint light that filters through the ice above. They are the quiet inhabitants of this hidden room, living out their lives in a state of perpetual calm, untroubled by the world outside. The water is heavy with salt, so dense that it feels like velvet, cradling the life within it in a cool, steady embrace that has remained unchanged for eons. There is a sense of deep time here, a feeling that the valleys are a library of the earth's memory. Because there is no water to wash things away and no microbes to break things down, the past remains exactly where it fell. A seal that wandered inland thousands of years ago might still be resting on the valley floor, its skin turned to leather by the dry air, looking as though it simply fell asleep yesterday. It is not a place of loss, but a place of preservation, where the elements act as a gentle hand, keeping everything just as it was. You can look at a stone or a ridge and know that it looked exactly this way when the first stars began to shine over the southern pole. This permanence is a comfort, a reminder that there are places in this world where the clock does not tick, where the rush of the modern day cannot reach, and where the only task is to exist in the quiet, golden light. As the sun moves in its long, circular path around the sky, the shadows in the dry valleys stretch and grow thin, reaching across the sand like long, blue fingers. The colors of the rocks begin to shift, turning from brown to a deep, rich purple, and the orange algae in the lakes glow with a soft internal fire. The air grows even stiller, if that is possible, as the cooling wind settles into the low points of the terrain. You might imagine yourself sitting on a smooth, wind-carved boulder, watching the light dance across the frozen surface of the lake. There is no sound of water lapping, no rustle of leaves, only the vast, echoing space of the valley and the feeling of the earth beneath you, solid and ancient and completely at peace. It is a place that invites you to let go of every stray thought, to let your mind become as clear and as open as the Antarctic sky. The valleys are a bridge between the world we know and the vast unknown of space. Scientists come here to understand what it might be like to stand on another planet. But for us, it is simply a sanctuary of stillness. The lack of moisture means there is no fog to blur the edges of the mountains, no haze to dim the brilliance of the stars when they finally appear. Everything is sharp, clear, and perfectly defined, yet softened by the sheer scale of the landscape. You are a small part of a very large and very quiet story. A story that does not need words to be understood. The dry earth, the polished stones, and the hidden lakes all whisper a message of endurance and calm. A reminder that there is a beauty in simplicity and a strength in standing still. As we prepare to leave these valleys behind, we take with us the feeling of the dry, cool air and the sight of the sun glinting off the crystal ice of the lakes. The landscape begins to blur at the edges as we move toward the next part of our journey. The colors fading into a soft, monochromatic hue, the wind hums a final low note, a lullaby for the stones and the sand that will remain here, unchanged for millions of years to come. The silence of the dry valleys follows us, a gentle weight that settles over our shoulders like a warm blanket. We are moving now toward the great ice shelves, where the land meets the sea in a slow, grinding collision of white and blue. But the stillness of the dust and the rock stays with us, grounding us in the deep, rhythmic pulse of the earth. The transition is gradual, a slow fading of the brown earth into the first fringes of the white snow. The air becomes a little crisper, a little more scented with the arrival of the ocean's breath. We leave the valleys to their long, sunlit sleep, knowing they will be there, exactly as they are whenever we need to return to their quiet embrace. The light is softening now, turning a pale, milky rose as it reflects off the distant ice, and the world feels wide and welcoming. We are drifting toward the coast, toward the places where the ice begins to flow and move. But for now, we simply float in the space between, carried by the gentle current of our own breath, moving deeper into the heart of the continent's long, white night. The silence of the deep interior is not a hollow thing, but rather a soft and heavy blanket that rests upon the land. A quiet so profound that it seems to have a weight and a texture all its own. As we move away from the frozen coastlines and travel toward the high, pale plateaus, the air becomes thinner and more still, tasting of nothing but purity and the faint, metallic scent of ancient ice. Here in the heart of the great white expanse, the wind often falls away entirely, leaving a world that feels as though it is held in a long, peaceful breath. If you were to stand in this place, wrapped in the warmth of thick wool and heavy down, you might notice that the only sound is the rhythmic thrum of your own heart, a steady and comforting reminder of life in a landscape that has remained unchanged for millions of years. But if you were to press your ear against the surface of the snow, or perhaps lean close to the edge of a deep blue crevasse. You would begin to hear the music of the continent itself. It is a slow, resonant song, a deep vibration that hums through the very soles of your feet, telling the story of the ice as it flows with the patience of a mountain. A glacier is not a static block of frozen water, but a river made of time and pressure, a living body that moves with a grace so deliberate it can only be measured by the passing of seasons. Imagine the weight of this ice, miles deep in some places, pressing down upon the ancient bedrock with a force that is both immense and gentle. Under this incredible pressure, the ice at the very bottom begins to change its nature, becoming soft and almost plastic, allowing the great mass to slide ever so slowly across the stone. This movement creates a sound that is difficult to describe. A low, melodic creak, like the floorboards of a very old house settling in the night, or the groan of a wooden ship swaying in a calm harbor. It is a sound of immense power, yet it is not loud. It is a whisper from the depths of the earth, a soft friction that speaks of the long journey from the center of the continent out toward the waiting sea. As the glacier flows, it encounters the contours of the land beneath it, navigating hidden valleys and rounding the shoulders of buried mountains. When the ice moves over a rise in the bedrock, the surface stretches and pulls, creating the long, elegant fissures we call crevices. These openings are like cathedrals of light, their walls glowing with a blue so intense and so pure that it seems to radiate from within the ice itself. If you were to look down into one of these cracks, you would see colors that do not exist anywhere else in nature. A spectrum of sapphire, turquoise, and deep indigo fading into a soft, velvety blackness at the bottom. The air inside these fissures is perfectly still, protected from the world above, and it carries the faint, crisp sound of ice crystals brushing against one another. It is a delicate tinkling, like the sound of glass wind chimes moving in a breeze you cannot feel. A tiny and beautiful counterpoint to the deep, resonant booming of the glacier's slow march. The snow that falls upon the high plateau is not like the wet, heavy flakes of the lower latitudes, but is instead a fine, dry powder as light as flour and as cold as the stars. Each crystal is a tiny masterpiece of geometry, landing softly upon the layers that came before it. Over centuries, these layers are pressed down by the weight of new snow, squeezing out the air and turning the white drifts into solid, translucent ice. Within this ice are tiny bubbles of air, trapped hundreds or even thousands of years ago, preserving the atmosphere of a different age. When a glacier moves and these bubbles are released or compressed, they make a sound like a soft sigh, a quiet release of breath that has been held since long before the first ships sailed these waters. It is a peaceful sound, a gentle reminder that the continent is a vast library of history, holding the memories of the world in its frozen embrace. Think of the texture of the ice beneath your hand. If you were to reach out and touch the wall of a slow-moving glacier, it would feel incredibly smooth, polished by the wind and the pressure into something that feels more like gemstone than frozen water. It is cold, certainly, but it is a dry, clean cold that does not sting, but rather grounds you in the present moment. The surface is often carved by the wind into beautiful, rippling patterns known as sastrugi. which look like the waves of a frozen ocean captured in mid-motion. These shapes are soft to the eye, their edges rounded and blurred by the pale light of the sun, which hangs low on the horizon, casting long violet shadows across the plains. The light is soft and diffused, turning the world into a study of white, gray and lavender, a color palette that invites the mind to rest and the eyes to soften. As the glacier nears the edge of the continent, it begins to interact with the sea, and the sounds change once again. The deep internal groaning of the ice becomes more frequent as the glacier begins to float, its weight supported by the salt water of the Southern Ocean. Here, the ice is no longer grinding against stone, but is instead bobbing gently on the swells, a motion so subtle it is almost imperceptible. The sound here is a rhythmic lapping, the water washing against the frozen walls with a soft, splashing melody. Occasionally, a large piece of the glacier will break away to become an iceberg, a process that happens with a sound like a distant, muffled drumbeat, a low thud that carries for miles through the cold, clear air. It is not a violent sound, but a natural conclusion to a journey that began hundreds of miles away and hundreds of years ago. It is the sound of the ice returning to the sea, a peaceful transition from one state to another. The icebergs that float away from the mother glacier are like wandering islands, each with its own shape and its own quiet song. Some are flat and vast, like floating plains of marble, while others are jagged and tall, resembling the spires of a sunken city. As they drift in the currents, they melt ever so slowly, their surfaces smoothed by the water and the sun until they look like sculptures carved from clouds. The sound of an iceberg melting is a soft, bubbly fizz like the sound of a glass of sparkling water held close to the ear. This is the sound of those ancient air bubbles finally escaping, a tiny celebration of release that joins the chorus of the waves and the wind. It is a soothing, repetitive sound that lulls the senses, a white noise that fills the space between the thoughts and brings a sense of profound calm. In the winter, when the sun disappears and the long night begins, the glaciers continue their silent work under the light of the moon and the shimmering curtains of the aurora borealis. The cold deepens and the ice becomes even more brittle, the sounds of its movement becoming sharper and more resonant in the thin, frozen air. Yet even in the dark, there is a sense of great peace. The continent does not sleep, but it moves with a slow, meditative rhythm that feels very much like rest. The stars above are bright and steady, their light reflecting off the snow in a way that makes the ground seem to glow from within. There is no one here to hear the music of the ice, no one to watch the slow dance of the glaciers. And yet it continues, a beautiful and private performance held in the heart of the wilderness. Imagine yourself lying in a sturdy, warm tent pitched on a safe, flat expanse of firm snow, far from the edges of any crevasse. You are wrapped in layers of soft fleece and thick, insulated sleeping bags, feeling perfectly protected from the elements outside. The air inside the tent is still and warm, smelling faintly of clean canvas and the steam from a cup of herbal tea. Outside, the glacier is moving, a vast and silent river beneath you, and you can feel its presence as a very faint, very low vibration, a soothing hum that seems to sync with the rhythm of your own breathing. The wind brushes against the fabric of the tent with a sound like a soft broom sweeping a stone floor. A gentle, repetitive rustle that marks the passage of time. As you lie there, you think of the miles of ice beneath you. The layers of history stacked one upon the other, all moving together toward the sea. You think of the bubbles of air, the crystals of snow and the ancient bedrock, all participating in this slow, grand journey, the sounds of the glacier. The creaks, the sighs, the distant thums become a lullaby, a song of the earth that has no beginning and no end. It is a sound that invites you to let go of the day, to release the tension in your shoulders and the thoughts in your mind, and to simply exist in the quiet, frozen beauty of the moment. The world is very large and very old, and in this place, time seems to stretch out until it is as vast and as seamless as the horizon. The movement of the ice is a reminder that even the most solid things are in a state of flow. That change can happen with a gentleness that is almost indistinguishable from stillness. It is a comforting thought, a realization that there is a deep and underlying order to the world, a rhythm that persists even in the harshest conditions. The glacier does not hurry. It does not struggle, it simply moves, following the path laid out for it by the land and the gravity of the earth. And as you listen to its song, you find yourself moving with it, drifting into a space of quiet reflection and deep, restorative rest. The cold outside only makes the warmth of your bed feel more secure. A cozy sanctuary in the middle of a vast, white dream. The light begins to fade even further, the lavender shadows deepening into a soft, midnight blue. The stars seem to press a little closer, their light twinkling in time with the faint tinkling of the ice crystals. The deep groan of the glacier becomes a distant memory, a soft bass note that anchors the melody of the wind. Everything is settling, everything is finding its place in the long, dark quiet of the polar night. The ice continues its journey, the water continues its lap, and the air continues its sigh, all of it weaving together into a tapestry of sound that is as soft as a whisper and as vast as the continent itself. As the night grows deeper, the distinction between the land and the sky begins to blur, until there is only a single, unified expanse of peaceful shadow. The glacier, in its infinite patience, moves another fraction of an inch, a tiny progress that is celebrated by the softest of creaks. This sound is not a disturbance, but a confirmation of the world's quiet vitality, a sign that even in the stillness, there is life and motion. It is a sound that carries you further away from the noise of the busy world, deeper into the heart of the silence, where the only thing that matters is the gentle rise and fall of your chest and the warmth of the blankets around you. The air is so still now that you can almost hear the snowflakes landing on the roof of the tent, each one a tiny, soft impact that adds to the weight of the silence. The glacier's song has become a hum, a vibration that you feel more than you hear, a grounding presence that tells you that you are safe. You are held and you are part of this grand, slow-moving story. The blue of the ice, the white of the snow, and the black of the night all merge into a single, soothing tone, a color of rest that fills your vision even with your eyes closed. We leave the high plateau now, moving down the long, gentle slopes toward the valleys where the ice meets the sea. The transition is seamless, a gradual shift from the deep, internal sounds of the glacier to the more fluid, rhythmic sounds of the coast. The air grows slightly heavier, slightly more moist, carrying the scent of the salt and the cold. Dark water, the ice beneath us, is still firm, still ancient, but it begins to feel the pull of the tides, a new rhythm that will guide us into the next part of our journey. The movement is effortless, a slow glide through a landscape of frozen beauty, where every sound is a promise of peace and every shadow is an invitation to sleep. The transition from the solid ice to the floating shelf is marked by a change in the quality of the light, which becomes more luminous as it reflects off the nearby water. The deep blues of the crevices are replaced by the shimmering silver of the sea ice, a vast mosaic of frozen plates that shift and groan with the movement of the waves. It is a more active landscape, yet it retains the same sense of profound calm, a busy stillness that is characteristic of this frozen world. The sounds here are more varied. A soft crunch, a gentle splash, a low whistle of wind through a sea-carved arch. But they all serve the same purpose, lulling the spirit into a state of quiet wonder. As we settle into this new environment, the sounds of the deep interior fade away, replaced by the gentle heartbeat of the ocean. The glacier's long journey has brought us to the edge of a new discovery, a place where the ice and the water dance together in a slow, eternal embrace. But for now, we simply rest in the transition, feeling the gentle sway of the floating ice and the cool, fresh breath of the sea air. The world is quiet, the night is long, and the ice is moving, carrying us softly into the heart of the next chapter, where the water tells its own story of the frozen south. The water does not merely freeze here. It transforms with a slow and deliberate grace, turning from a restless, dark expanse into a vast, white kingdom that stretches toward every horizon. As the sun begins its long, seasonal departure, dipping lower and lower until it merely brushes the edge of the world with a thumbprint of gold, the sea begins to thicken. It starts as a delicate shimmer on the surface, a fine dusting of ice crystals known as frasil, which drift like tiny, transparent needles in the swell. You might imagine the sound of these crystals brushing against one another, a soft, hushed clinking like the sound of distant wind chimes made of glass. As the temperature drops further, these needles gather together, forming small, circular pads with ruffled edges that the explorers called pancake ice. They bob gently in the dark water, bumping shoulders in the slow rhythm of the tide, until the cold binds them into a single, solid sheet. This is the beginning of the long night, a time when the world draws a deep, icy breath and settles into a stillness that feels as old as the stars themselves. Inside the small wooden huts tucked against the rocky skirts of the continent, the transition is felt in the changing quality of the light. The bright, sharp glare of the summer sun gives way to a lingering twilight that paints the snow in shades of violet, indigo, and a soft, dusty rose. The air outside grows heavy and crisp, so dry that it feels like breathing in the essence of the mountains themselves. The men within the huts move with a quiet, practiced ease, their boots thumping softly on the floorboards as they tend to the stoves. There is the scent of coal smoke and dried tobacco, the earthy aroma of wool socks warming near the fire, and the low, steady hum of a kettle beginning to sing. The walls of these shelters are thick, insulated with layers of felt and seaweed, creating a small, golden pocket of warmth against the immense, encroaching dark. Here, the passage of time is measured not by the rising of the sun, but by the steady ticking of a wall clock and the ritual of the evening meal. As the last sliver of the sun vanishes below the horizon, not to return for many months, a profound calm settles over the landscape. The wind, which can howl with such ferocity, often falls away into a whisper, leaving a silence so deep you can hear the faint, crystalline crackle of your own breath. The sky above becomes a vast tapestry of velvet black, so clear and transparent that the stars do not just twinkle. They glow with a steady, unwavering light. You might look up and see the Milky Way arching overhead like a bridge of silver dust, so bright that it casts soft, gray shadows across the snow. In this stillness, the great ice sheets seem to pulse with a slow, geological heartbeat, the weight of the glaciers pressing down upon the ancient stone beneath, a reminder that the land is alive in its own patient way. Life inside the winter quarters becomes a study in small comforts and the beauty of routine. The galley is the heart of the home, where the cook works with simple ingredients to create meals that warm the spirit as much as the body. There is the rhythmic sound of a knife chopping through salted beef, the soft hiss of frying onions, and the clatter of tin plates being set upon a heavy wooden table. The men sit close together, their faces illuminated by the amber glow of oil lamps, sharing stories that have been told many times before, yet never lose their charm. They speak of green fields and distant lands, the smell of damp earth after a spring rain, and the sound of birdsong in the trees, bringing the warmth of their memories into the frozen heart of the polar night. The darkness outside does not feel like a wall, but rather a soft blanket that cradles their small world, keeping the vastness of the continent at a gentle distance. In the corner of the room, someone might be writing in a journal, the nib of the pen scratching softly across the paper as they record the day's observations. They note the temperature, the direction of the wind, and the strange, beautiful colors they saw in the sky before the light faded. Others might be mending a torn mitten or polishing a pair of leather boots, their hands moving with the slow, meditative pace of those who have all the time in the world. There is no rush here, no sense of urgency. The ice has locked the ships in place, and the seasons must run their course before the path opens once more. This period of waiting is not a burden, but a gift, a chance to turn inward, to reflect and to find contentment in the simple act of being. Outside, the aurora australis begins its nightly dance, a silent symphony of light that ripples across the heavens. It starts as a faint, ghostly green glow on the horizon, like the breath of a forest, before growing into shimmering curtains of emerald and gold that fold and unfold against the stars. The lights move with a fluid, liquid motion, swaying as if caught in a high-altitude breeze that only they can feel. Sometimes a fringe of violet or crimson appears along the bottom edge, a soft blush of color that reflects dimly on the white plains below. To stand beneath this display is to feel very small and very peaceful, a quiet observer of a cosmic ballet that has been performing for millions of years. The snow beneath your feet catches the light, sparkling like a field of fallen diamonds. each crystal a tiny mirror for the celestial fire above. The dogs, curled in their snowy burrows outside, sleep with their noses tucked under their bushy tails, their breath rising in small puffs of steam. They are well fed and warm in their thick coats, dreaming of the long runs across the barrier ice and the crisp smell of the frozen sea. Occasionally, one might stir and let out a long, low howl that echoes softly against the ice ridges, a sound that is not lonely, but rather a greeting to the vast, empty spaces the sound carries for miles in the thin, cold air, eventually fading into the velvet silence of the night. Inside the hut, the men hear it and smile, knowing their companions are safe and resting well, waiting for the return of the light just as they are. As the weeks turn into months, the rhythm of the long night becomes as natural as breathing. The initial strangeness of the constant dark fades, replaced by a deep appreciation for the subtleties of the shadow. One learns to see the different textures of the snow in the moonlight, the soft wind-blown drifts that look like frozen waves, and the hard, sculpted ridges known as sastrugi that march across the plains like rows of white marble. The ice itself speaks in a language of low moans and sharp cracks, the sound of the great plates shifting and settling under the immense pressure of their own weight. It is a comforting sound, a reminder of the power and the permanence of the world, a steady bass note in the quiet melody of the winter. Scientific work continues in the dark, a slow and careful gathering of knowledge. A scientist might step out into the cold to check a thermometer, his breath forming a white cloud around his head as he moves. He carries a small lantern that casts a warm, yellow circle on the snow, illuminating the delicate frost patterns that have formed on the instruments. He works with steady hands, recording the numbers with a pencil that has been warmed in his pocket so the lathe will not snap. These small acts of curiosity are the threads that bind the men to the wider world, a way of understanding the magnificent patterns of the earth even in the depths of the polar gloom. The data is collected and stored, a quiet treasure of information that will one day tell the story of this silent time. In the evenings, the men might gather for a lecture or a reading, the voice of the speaker rising and falling in a gentle cadence that fills the room. They might listen to a description of the Amazon rainforest, imagining the thick, humid air and the vibrant green of the canopy, or hear a poem about the rolling hills of the English countryside. The contrast between the words and their surroundings creates a sense of wonder, a realization of how diverse and beautiful the planet truly is. The fire in the stove crackles softly, a piece of coal settling into the embers with a muted pop, and the warmth wraps around them like a heavy cloak. One by one, they begin to yawn, the long day of quiet work and reflection coming to a peaceful close. The transition to sleep is effortless in the heart of the winter. The bunks are lined with reindeer skins and heavy wool blankets, creating nests of warmth that are almost impossible to leave. As the lamps are turned down, the shadows in the hut lengthen and soften, the red glow of the stove the only remaining light. The sound of the wind outside, if it speaks at all, is a distant, lulling hum that only serves to make the interior feel more secure. The men drift off into dreams that are often bright and colorful, filled with the sights and sounds of a world in bloom, while their bodies rest in the profound stillness of the Antarctic night. There is no worry for the morrow. For the morrow will be much like today. A calm and steady journey through the darkness toward the eventual return of the sun. Deep beneath the ice, the sea remains liquid and dark. A hidden world where life continues in a slow, suspended state. The Weddell seals move through the water with effortless grace, their large, dark eyes searching for the faint light that filters through the cracks in the ice. They find breathing holes kept open by the constant movement of the tides, surfacing to take a long, deep breath before sliding back into the silent depths. Their whistles and chirps resonate through the water, a series of melodic pings and trills that sound like electronic music from a distant future. These sounds vibrate through the ice, a hidden song that hums beneath the feet of the men in the huts, a reminder that even in the coldest reaches, the pulse of life remains steady and strong. The midwinter feast is the pinnacle of the long night, a celebration held when the sun has reached its furthest point and begins its slow, invisible journey back toward the south. The hut is decorated with whatever materials are at hand. Bits of colored paper, scraps of ribbon, and perhaps a small handmade tree. The table groans under the weight of a special meal. Perhaps a tinned ham or a rich plum pudding that has been saved for this very occasion. There is laughter and music, the sound of a gramophone playing a scratchy recording of a popular waltz, and the clinking of glasses raised in a toast to home and to each other. It is a moment of pure connection, a shared recognition of their strength and their companionship in the face of the great unknown. After the feast, the mood settles back into its quiet, meditative rhythm. The days begin to lengthen, though the change is imperceptible at first. The sky remains dark, the stars remain bright, and the cold remains absolute. Yet there is a subtle shift in the air, a feeling of anticipation that hums beneath the surface of their daily lives. They begin to prepare for the spring, checking the sledges, repairing the harnesses, and sorting through the supplies that will be needed for the journeys ahead. These tasks are done with the same unhurried care, the same quiet focus that has defined their winter. The darkness is no longer a mystery to be feared, but a familiar friend that has taught them the value of patience and the beauty of the small, glowing moments of life. The snow continues to fall, not in heavy storms but in light, airy flakes that drift down like feathers, adding layer upon layer to the ancient ice. Each flake is a tiny, unique masterpiece of geometry, landing softly and joining the vast expanse that covers the continent. The landscape is constantly being reshaped by the wind, which carves the drifts into smooth, flowing shapes that resemble the dunes of a white desert. In the moonlight, these shapes take on a ghostly, ethereal quality, their curves and hollows filled with deep blue shadows. It is a world of monochrome beauty, a place where the absence of color only serves to highlight the incredible variety of form and texture. As the weeks pass, the first hint of light begins to appear on the northern horizon, a thin, pale line of gray that gradually turns to a soft, pearly white. It is not the sun itself, but the reflection of its approach, a promise that the long night is nearing its end. The men watch this light with a quiet, reverent joy, standing outside for a few minutes each day to witness the slow return of the world. The air feels different now, charged with a new energy. though the cold is still biting and the ice shows no sign of melting. The transition is as slow and deliberate as the freezing of the sea had been. A gradual unfolding of the light that allows the eyes and the spirit to adjust to the coming brilliance. Inside the hut, the preparations reach a steady crescendo. The smell of fresh bread baking in the oven fills the air, a scent that speaks of new beginnings and the warmth of the coming season. The maps are spread out on the table, their white spaces waiting to be filled with the details of their explorations. There is a sense of purpose in every movement, a quiet confidence that has been forged in the stillness of the winter. They have survived the long night not by fighting against it, but by embracing its rhythm, by finding the light within themselves when the world outside was dark. The final days of the darkness are perhaps the most peaceful of all. The sense of waiting is replaced by a sense of readiness, a calm acceptance of whatever the new season may bring. The stars seem to glow with a final, brilliant intensity, as if bidding a reluctant farewell to the stage they have occupied for so long. The aurora makes one last spectacular appearance, its green and violet ribbons dancing with a frantic, joyful energy before fading into the brightening sky. The world is poised on the edge of a great change, a transition from the silent, frozen dark to the vibrant, endless light of the polar summer. As the first true rays of the sun finally crest the horizon, painting the tops of the mountains in a blinding, golden fire, the long night officially comes to a close. The light is warm and welcoming, a physical presence that touches the skin and fills the eyes with a sudden, overwhelming brightness. The shadows retreat, the colors return, and the continent wakes from its long, icy slumber. The men step out into the light, their faces upturned to the sun, feeling the gentle heat of its rays for the first time in months. It is a moment of profound peace, a realization that the cycle has turned once more, and that the journey continues. The transition from the dark to the light is a slow and beautiful process, a reminder of the enduring power of the natural world. The ice begins to groan and creak in new ways. The temperature rises ever so slightly, and the first seals begin to haul themselves onto the floes to bask in the sun. The world is opening up, expanding, reaching out toward the horizon with a renewed sense of possibility. And as the light grows stronger, it begins to illuminate the hidden details of the land, revealing the intricate patterns of the ice and the ancient strength of the mountains, leading us gently toward the next phase of this frozen story, where the land itself begins to speak of its long and silent history. The silence of the ice is not a void, but a presence, a soft and heavy blanket that rests upon the shoulders of the world. As we move further into this white expanse, we find ourselves entering a time that does not behave like the time we know in the green places of the earth. Here, the sun does not hurry to its rest, nor does the moon feel the need to rise in its usual silver arc. Instead, we have arrived at the threshold of the long day, a season where the light becomes a permanent resident, a golden guest that refuses to leave the room. It is a slow and shimmering period of the year, where the very concept of a morning or an evening begins to dissolve like a flake of snow on a warm palm, leaving behind only a sense of eternal, quiet being. Imagine the horizon, a soft line where the pale blue of the sky meets the brilliant, textured white of the frozen sea. In a world of clocks and schedules, we are used to the sun climbing a steep ladder and then sliding down the other side. But here, the sun is a patient traveler. It moves in a gentle, rolling circle, skimming the tops of the mountains as if it were a hand brushing across the surface of a velvet cloth. It stays low, casting shadows that are incredibly long and thin, stretching across the snow like the fingers of a sleeping giant. These shadows are not dark or frightening. They are a deep, translucent blue, the color of a summer lake at twilight, and they shift so slowly that you could sit for hours watching a single ridge of ice cast its cooling shade across a valley of frost. The light during this long day has a quality that is difficult to find anywhere else on our planet. It is a thick, honeyed light, filtered through layers of cold air that act like a crystal lens. It catches the edges of the ice crystals that float in the air, creating tiny, shimmering sparks that dance before your eyes. These are the diamond dust, the smallest jewels of the atmosphere, drifting downward with no sound at all, settling on the sleeves of a heavy woolen coat or the brim of a hat. When you breathe in, the air is so crisp and clean that it feels like drinking from a mountain spring. A coldness that wakes the senses gently, accompanied by the faint metallic scent of snow and the distant, earthy smell of ancient rocks that have been exposed to the sun for the first time in 1,000 years. As the sun circles the sky, never once dipping below the edge of the world, the ice begins to respond in a way that is rhythmic and calm. The vast sheets of the interior, miles thick and heavy with the weight of eons, do not melt, but they do change. The surface layers, under the constant gaze of the sun, develop a texture like granulated sugar. If you were to walk across it, your boots would make a soft, rhythmic crunch, a sound like teeth biting into a crisp apple, echoing softly in the immense stillness. There is no wind today, only a stillness so profound that you can hear the heartbeat of the continent, a slow and steady pulse that tells of a land at peace with its own solitude. In the small outposts where humans have come to study this quiet land, the long day brings a different kind of rhythm to life. Inside the wooden huts and the modern stations, the light pours through the windows at 2 in the morning, just as it does at 2 in the afternoon. People hang thick curtains of dark felt or heavy canvas to mimic the night, creating small, cozy pockets of artificial evening where they can rest. Imagine the interior of such a place. The walls smelling of pine wood and the faint, comforting aroma of toasted bread and brewing tea. The hum of a heater provides a steady, low-frequency lullaby, a mechanical purr that reminds those inside of the warmth they have carried with them to the bottom of the world. They move quietly, their voices hushed by the sheer scale of the landscape outside, sharing stories of home or reading books whose pages have grown soft from being turned by many hands. Outside, the wildlife of the coast also feels the pull of the unending light. The penguins in their neat and sturdy suits do not seem to mind the lack of darkness. They continue their slow, waddling processions from the sea to their nests, their feet pattering on the smooth stones with a sound like rain on a tin roof. They are busy with the logistics of life, tending to their eggs or their chicks with a focus that is both humble and grand. A parent stands perfectly still, tucked into the warmth of its own feathers, while the sun moves behind it, casting a long, penguin-shaped shadow across the rookery. There is a sense of communal purpose here, a quiet understanding that the light is a gift to be used for the raising of the next generation. The sounds they make are soft squawks and murmurs, a domestic chatter that fills the air without breaking the underlying peace of the day. Further out, where the ice meets the deep indigo water of the Southern Ocean, the seals haul themselves onto the floes to bask in the warmth. A Weddell seal with its large, dark eyes and silver-spotted fur stretches out on a flat shelf of ice, its body heavy and relaxed. It closes its eyes, letting the sun warm its skin, occasionally letting out a long, low sigh that turns into a puff of white steam in the cold air. The water around the ice is calm, a mirror reflecting the pale sky, broken only by the occasional ripple of a whale's back as it rises to breathe. The sound of that breath is a soft asterisk whoosh asterisk, a gentle release of air that carries for miles in the silence, a reminder that even in this frozen world, life is breathing steady and slow. The long day is a time of observation and gentle work. Scientists in their bright red parkas move across the snow, not with urgency, but with the careful deliberation of those who know the day will not end. They might be measuring the thickness of the ice or collecting tiny samples of air trapped in bubbles from centuries ago. Each bubble is a tiny time capsule, a breath of the past preserved in a crystal sphere. As they work, the sun moves from the east to the north and then to the west, changing the colors of the mountains from a soft rose to a brilliant gold, and finally to a cool, ethereal violet, the mountains themselves. The Transantarctic Range stand like silent sentinels, their peaks jagged and white, their valleys filled with glaciers that flow so slowly they seem to be frozen in the middle of a great, sweeping gesture. Think of the texture of the snow under this constant light. It is not just white. It is a palette of 1,000 subtle shades. In the hollows of the drifts, the color is a pale turquoise, a hue so delicate it seems to have been painted with a single drop of ink in a gallon of water. On the ridges, where the wind has carved the snow into shapes called zastrugi, the edges are sharp and white, looking like the waves of a frozen ocean caught in a moment of turbulence. These shapes are smooth to the touch, polished by the wind until they feel like marble, cold and unyielding, yet beautiful in their mathematical precision. As we linger in this long day, the sense of time begins to drift away entirely. Without the rising and setting of the sun to mark the passage of hours, one day flows seamlessly into the next. It is a long, continuous moment of clarity. The light does not tire the eyes. Instead, it seems to wash them clean. You might find yourself sitting on a crate of supplies, watching the way the light catches the top of a distant glacier, and realize that an hour has passed in what felt like a heartbeat. There is a profound luxury in this stillness, a freedom from the ticking of the clock that allows the mind to settle into a deep and quiet state of reflection. The history of this place is written in the layers of the ice, and during the long day, that history feels very close to the surface. The explorers of the past, who came here in their wooden ships, must have stood on these same shores, bathed in this same unmoving light. They would have spent these months preparing their equipment, sewing canvas tents by the light of the sun at midnight, their fingers moving rhythmically through the heavy fabric. They would have listened to the same sounds we hear now. The creak of the ice, the call of the birds, the wind whispering across the snow. Their presence is a soft echo in the landscape, a reminder of the human desire to see and to understand, carried out with a quiet persistence that matches the land itself. In the heart of the continent, on the high plateau, the long day is even more intense. Here, the ice is flat and featureless for hundreds of miles in every direction. It is a world of pure geometry, a white plain under a blue dome. The sun circles overhead like a golden coin on a string, never varying its height, creating a sense of being at the very center of a great, revolving universe. The wind here is a constant companion, but it is a steady, predictable wind that hums a low note against the fabric of a tent or the metal of a pole. It is a lonely place, perhaps, but it is a loneliness that is full of peace. A place where the clutter of the world is stripped away, leaving only the sky, the sun, and the ice. As the weeks of the long day pass, the temperature remains steady, a cold that is manageable because it is so dry. The moisture in the air is so low that the snow never feels damp. It is always like powder, always ready to be lifted by a breeze and carried to a new resting place. If you were to spill a drop of water, it would freeze before it hit the ground, turning into a tiny bead of ice that rolls across the surface like a marble. This dryness gives the landscape a sharpness, a high-definition quality where every ridge and every shadow is perfectly defined. Even from miles away, you can see the curvature of the earth on the horizon, a gentle bending of the world that reminds you of how small we are, and yet how safely cradled by the planet. The long day is also a time of preparation for the land itself. Beneath the ice, in the hidden lakes that have been sealed off for millions of years, the water remains liquid and dark, protected from the cold by the thick insulation of the glacier above. In these secret places, life might exist in its simplest forms. Tiny microbes that have never seen the sun, living their slow lives in the warmth of the Earth's crust. The contrast between the brilliant, sun-drenched surface and the dark, silent depths is one of the many mysteries of this continent. A balance of light and dark that keeps the world in equilibrium. As we sit in the warmth of our imagined shelter, looking out at the endless sun, we can feel the weight of our own eyelids beginning to grow heavy. The light is constant, yes, but it is a soothing light, a soft glow that does not demand anything from us. It is the light of a nightlight in a childhood bedroom, a reassurance that the world is still there, even as we prepare to close our eyes. The activities of the day, the walking, the observing, the quiet conversations, have all been leading to this moment of rest. Even in a land where the sun does not set, the body knows when it is time to turn inward, to seek the warmth of the blankets and the softness of the pillow. The long day will eventually begin to wane. Though the change is so slow, it is almost imperceptible at first. The sun will begin to dip just a fraction lower each day, touching the horizon for a few minutes before rising again. But for now, we remain in the height of the season, in the full embrace of the light. The shadows continue their slow dance. The ice continues its quiet creaking, and the continent remains wrapped in its golden mantle. There is no rush to reach the end of this day, for the day is long and generous, providing all the time we need to simply be. The air outside the window of our shelter begins to take on a slightly cooler tint, a hint of the violet that comes when the sun reaches its lowest point in the circle. The diamond dust in the air seems to glow a little brighter, catching the horizontal rays and turning them into streaks of fire and opal. The world is settling, the penguins are tucking their heads under their wings, and the seals are sinking into a deeper sleep on their rafts of ice. The hum of the station is a low, comforting vibration, a heartbeat that matches our own. We feel a sense of profound gratitude for this stillness, for the way the land holds its breath and allows us to witness its most private moments. The vastness of Antarctica is not a thing to be conquered, but a thing to be experienced with humility and a quiet heart. As we prepare to move from this chapter of light into the next phase of our journey, we carry the warmth of the sun with us, a golden light that remains even when we close our eyes. The transition is gentle, like the sliding of one shadow over another, leading us toward a different kind of quiet, where the colors of the world begin to soften and fade into the deep, restful hues of the coming change. The long day has given us its beauty, and now it allows us to drift, slowly and peacefully, toward the next soft whisper of the ice. The quiet of the deep interior begins to soften now, as we turn our minds away from the high, silent plateaus of ice and move toward the places where the frozen earth meets the patient, rolling sea here at the edges of the world. The air feels just a little heavier, carrying with it a faint, salt-sweet scent that speaks of movement and hidden life. We are leaving the white stillness of the center and drifting toward the coast, where the blue of the water begins to peek through the cracks in the silver shelves. It is a slow transition, a gradual softening of the landscape, like the way a dream shifts from one quiet room to another. Along these fringes, the ice is not a solid, unmoving weight, but a living thing that sighs and shifts with the rhythm of the tides. Imagine the sound of a distant, low creak, the kind of wooden floor might make in a house settled deep into the night. This is the sound of the ice shelves meeting the ocean, a gentle conversation between the cold land and the deep, dark water. As we reach the shoreline, we find the residents who call this pale fringe their home. They do not hurry, for in this place, there is no need for haste. The most famous of these neighbors are the penguins, who stand in clusters like small, feathered stones upon the ice. We look at the Adelie penguins, with their neat black coats and their rings of white around their eyes, standing so still that they seem to be part of the landscape itself. They wait for the right moment to slide into the water, a movement that is less a dive and more a graceful letting go. When they are on the ice, they waddle with a slow, rhythmic sway, their flippers held slightly out for balance, creating a soft, scuffing sound against the snow. It is a peaceful sound, like the brushing of a broom on a stone porch. They gather in colonies, not for noise or bustle, but for the quiet comfort of being near one another. There is a great warmth in their huddling, a shared heat that keeps the cold at bay while the wind hums its low, steady song over the ridges of the frozen waves. We might see the emperor penguins further down the coast, those tall and stately figures who carry a golden glow upon their necks, like the first light of a winter morning captured in their feathers. They are the masters of patience. They stand for weeks in the darkness of the winter, tucked close together, their heads bowed as they protect the precious life held beneath them. There is no urgency in their world, only the steady beat of a heart and the slow passage of the stars overhead. To watch them is to understand the beauty of waiting. They do not fight the wind. They lean into it, their thick feathers forming a coat so dense that not a single breath of cold can reach their skin. The smell here is clean and sharp, the scent of frozen salt and the faint, earthy aroma of the colony. A smell that feels grounded and real against the backdrop of the endless blue sky. Beneath the surface of the water, where the light filters down in long, emerald rays, the world is even more tranquil. The water is very cold, but it is also very still, acting as a thick blanket that muffles all the sounds of the world above. Here, the Weddell seals drift through the depths like slow-moving clouds. They have large, dark eyes that see perfectly in the dim light, and their faces always seem to carry a soft, contented expression as if they are perpetually on the verge of a pleasant sleep. They breathe through small holes in the ice, coming up for a quiet sigh of air before sinking back down into the weightless blue. When they are under the ice, they sing to one another, but it is not a loud song. It is a series of whistles and trills, low-frequency hums that vibrate through the water like the strings of a cello being plucked very softly in a distant room. These sounds are the heartbeat of the coast, a musical language that reminds us that even in the coldest places, there is a deep and abiding connection. If we were to lie down on the ice and press our ear to the surface, we might hear those seals humming far below, a vibration that feels like a gentle pulse against the cheek. It is a comforting thought to know that beneath the frozen crust, there is a liquid world full of grace and slow, drifting motion. The seals often haul themselves up onto the ice to rest, their gray-spotted fur drying in the pale sun until it looks like soft velvet. They stretch out, their bodies heavy and relaxed. Completely unafraid, they might give a small yawn, showing the pink of their mouths, before closing their eyes and letting the sun warm their backs. There is nothing for them to do but exist, to feel the rise and fall of their own breath, and to listen to the ice as it talks to the sea. Further out, where the ice breaks into large, flat cakes called floes, we find the craybaiter seals. Despite their name, they prefer the tiny, translucent creatures that drift in the currents, and they spend their days lounging on the white rafts of ice, drifting wherever the ocean chooses to take them. They are like travelers on a slow-moving train, watching the scenery of the coast glide by without ever having to lift a finger. The light at the edge of the continent is different than it is in the center. It is pearlescent, reflecting off the water in a way that makes everything seem to glow from within. The ice floes are not just white. They are tinged with shades of mint green and robin's egg blue, colors so soft they seem to be made of shadows and dreams. We notice the birds that fly above these waters, the petrels and the skuas, whose wings make a soft, snapping sound in the crisp air. The snow petrel is as white as the drifts it flies over, making it look like a wandering flake of snow that has forgotten how to fall. It glides on the updrafts created by the ice cliffs, rising and falling with an effortless grace that requires no exertion. To watch it is to feel the lightness of the air itself. It does not chirp or cry out frequently. It simply exists as a silent shadow against the blue, a tiny speck of life navigating the vastness with a quiet confidence. The air they fly through is so pure that it feels like drinking cold water from a mountain spring, a refreshing and clarifying presence that settles deep in the lungs. As we move along the shoreline, we encounter the giant icebergs that have broken away from the main shelf. These are the cathedrals of the South, enormous structures of ancient ice that float with a heavy, dignified slow motion. They are weathered by the wind and the waves into fantastic shapes. Arches that look like doorways to another world, and spires that point toward the heavens. The water laps against their sides with a rhythmic, hollow sound, a gentle splashing that repeats over and over. Like a lullaby inside these icebergs, the air is trapped in tiny bubbles that have been there for thousands of years. As the ice melts ever so slightly in the sun, these bubbles are released with a tiny, musical pop, a sound the sailors call Burgy Seltzer. It is a soft, fizzy whisper, the sound of the past finally breathing out into the present. The colors of these bergs are deep and soulful. Where the ice is most dense, it turns a shade of blue, so dark it looks like the sky just before the stars come out. In other places, it is as clear as glass, showing the ripples and veins that have formed over centuries of pressure. We can imagine running a hand over the surface of the ice. It would be wet and slick, but also strangely smooth, like a polished gemstone that has been cooled in a deep cellar. There is no heat here, but there is a sense of immense, cooling peace. The icebergs do not hurry to their destination. They are guided by the deep currents of the ocean, moving only a few miles a day, content to be carried by the strength of the water. Along the rocky beaches of the islands near the coast, we find the mosses and lichens that represent the plant life of this frozen realm. They are small and humble, clinging to the dark volcanic stones like patches of green and orange velvet. They do not grow tall, for the wind is too strong for that, but they spread out in soft mats that cushion the ground. If you were to touch them, they would feel springy and damp, a tiny forest that lives on a scale of millimeters. They wait through the long winters under a blanket of snow, perfectly preserved, and when the sun returns, they drink in the moisture and glow with a quiet, emerald light. They remind us that life does not always need to be loud or large to be successful. It only needs to be persistent and patient. In the tide pools between the rocks, the water is crystal clear, revealing small sea stars and anemones that sway in the gentle movement of the waves. They are bright spots of color, pinks and purples against the gray stone. They move with such slowness that it is hard to see them moving at all, their tiny tentacles reaching out to touch the water with a delicate, rhythmic pulse. The world here is scaled down, a miniature universe where every small movement is purposeful and calm. The sound of the tide coming in is a slow, creeping hiss as the water fills the gaps between the stones, bringing with it the coolness of the deep sea. As the sun begins to dip lower toward the horizon, casting long violet shadows across the ice, the animals of the coast begin to settle for the night. The penguins tuck their heads under their flippers, turning themselves into soft mounds of feathers. The seals find a comfortable spot on the floes, their breathing slowing down until it matches the rhythm of the ocean swells. The wind drops to a whisper, and the only sound left is the faint, distant grinding of the ice, a sound that is more of a feeling than a noise, a low vibration that tells us the earth is resting. The water reflects the sky, turning from gold to pink to a deep, velvety indigo. The transition is seamless, a gradual fading of light that invites the mind to let go of the day. The edges of the continent are not a place of struggle, but a place of balance, where the land, the sea, and the life that inhabits them exist in a state of quiet harmony. Everything here knows its place, and everything moves in time with the slow turning of the world. We feel the coolness of the air on our skin, a refreshing chill that makes the thought of a warm, soft blanket seem even more inviting. We watch as a single iceberg drifts slowly out toward the open sea, a pale ghost in the gathering dusk. It carries with it the silence of the interior and the stories of the wind, moving toward the horizon where the water meets the stars. The movement is so steady, so inevitable that it brings a sense of profound calm. There is nothing to be done, nothing to be decided. We are simply observers of a world that takes its time, a world that values the stillness of a long, cold breath. The stars begin to appear now, one by one, reflecting in the dark mirrors of the tide pools and the vast stretches of the open ocean. They do not flicker so much as they glow, steady points of light in a sky that feels infinite. The cold is not a harsh thing here. It is a quiet presence, a stillness that settles over the heart and mind like a soft weight. We breathe in the salt, the ice and the silence, feeling the way the world at the edge of the ice slows down, preparing for the long, dark beauty of the polar night. The animals are asleep now, their forms blending into the shadows of the rocks and the white of the drifts. The ocean continues its patient work, lapping at the shore, a sound that has not changed for millions of years. It is a constant, a reminder that the world will always have these quiet places, these fringes of peace where life goes on in the most gentle of ways. We feel ourselves drifting with the tide, moving away from the solid ground and toward the vast, open mystery of the waters that surround the frozen south. As we leave the shore behind, the sounds of the seals and the penguins fade into the distance, replaced by the deep, rhythmic breathing of the sea itself. The water is a cradle, vast and dark and comforting, holding the continent in its arms. We move now toward the final understanding of this place, toward the great cycles of water and ice that connect this cold land to the rest of the breathing world, feeling the pull of the currents as they light us, softly and surely toward the deep, blue quiet of the open ocean. And so we find ourselves returning from the salt spray of the moving water, drifting back toward the great white silence of the interior, where the air is so still that one might hear the sound of a single snowflake settling upon the crust. This is the heart of the high plateau, a place where time does not tick or chime, but rather flows like a slow, heavy river of ice moving only inches in a human lifetime. Here the snow is not merely a covering, but a vast and ancient library, a quiet archive of every breath the world has ever taken. As we settle into this stillness, imagine the quality of the light as it strikes the surface of the polar plateau in the height of the summer season. It is a light that does not come from a single point in the sky, but seems to emanate from the ground itself. A soft and pearly glow that smooths out the ridges of the wind-carved drifts until the horizon becomes a gentle blur of white and pale violet. The air here is the purest on the planet, scrubbed clean by thousands of miles of empty space. And when you draw it in, it feels cool and crisp, like a drink of water from a hidden mountain spring. There is no scent of damp earth or green growing things, only the faint metallic sweetness of the cold, and the subtle dusty smell of dry ice crystals dancing in the breeze. We walk softly across this landscape, our boots making a rhythmic, satisfying crunch in the firm snow, a sound that is quickly swallowed by the immense, velvet quiet of the plains. Beneath our feet lie layers upon layers of history, each one a season of the world's past, pressed down by the weight of the years into a solid, translucent blue if we were to look deep into the ice, far below the surface where the light turns the color of a robin's egg. We would find tiny, perfect bubbles of air. These are little pockets of the atmosphere from centuries ago, trapped in the moment they fell as snow, held in a frozen embrace so that we might one day understand how the wind felt in a time before cities or engines. It is a comforting thought to know that the ice remembers the sky, and that even the smallest breath of a breeze from 1,000 years ago is still here, resting peacefully in the heart of the continent. The ice does not hurry to reveal these secrets. It holds them with a steady, patient hand, keeping the world's memory safe and cool beneath the long, slow shadows of the polar day. As the sun circles the horizon in its never-ending loop, the colors of the snow begin to shift and change in a slow, kaleidoscopic dance in the early morning, if such a term can be used in a land of constant light. The shadows are long and cast in a delicate shade of cornflower blue, stretching out across the Sastrugi, those elegant wave-like ridges carved by the wind. These ridges look like a sea that has been frozen in the middle of a gentle swell, their peaks sharp and white, their troughs filled with a soft, hazy gloom as the hours pass. The blue fades into a pale gold, and the entire plateau seems to warm, not in temperature but in spirit, as if the ice itself were glowing with a quiet inner fire. There is no sound here but the occasional sigh of the wind, a low and melodic hum that rises and falls like the breathing of a giant. It is a sound that invites you to close your eyes and listen to the rhythm of the earth, a steady and ancient heartbeat that has been pulsing since the mountains were young. In this high and lonely place, the logistics of human presence are simple and quiet. Small groups of scientists live in stations that look like tiny jewels dropped onto a vast white velvet cloth. Inside these shelters, the world is warm and bright, smelling of toasted bread and coffee, a sharp and pleasant contrast to the immense emptiness outside. The walls are thick to keep out the chill, and the sound of the wind against the metal siding is nothing more than a lullaby, a reminder of the safety and stillness within. Here, life is measured in the small comforts of a wool sweater, the steam rising from a mug, and the steady, flickering light of a laptop screen as data is recorded. Outside, the great white desert continues its slow work, unaware of the small sparks of warmth that huddle upon its surface. The researchers move between the buildings with a deliberate, unhurried pace, their parkas crinkling softly in the cold, their breath forming small, fleeting clouds that vanish into the dry air. It is a life of focus and calm, where the complexities of the distant world are replaced by the simple necessity of staying warm and the quiet joy of discovery. We move further inland toward the very center of the map, where the ice reaches its greatest thickness. Here, the crust of the earth is bowed down by the sheer weight of the frozen water, creating a landscape that is as flat and featureless as a calm lake. In this place, the sense of scale is lost, and the mind begins to drift, untethered from the usual markers of distance and time. You might walk for hours and feel as though you have not moved at all. So uniform and beautiful is the white expanse. But if you look closely at the ground, you will see the intricate patterns of the frost, the way the crystals lock together in perfect, geometric shapes like a carpet of tiny, shimmering stars. Each crystal is a masterpiece of symmetry, formed in the high, cold clouds and falling gently to earth to join its billions of companions. There is a deep peace in this uniformity, a feeling of being held in a space where nothing is required of you but to simply be, to breathe and to observe the slow passing of the light. As the season begins to lean toward the twilight of the coming winter, the sun starts its long, slow descent toward the edge of the world. This transition is not a sudden event, but a lingering farewell that lasts for weeks. The sky takes on hues that are rarely seen elsewhere. Deep magentas, bruised purples, and a yellow so pale it is almost white. The light becomes slanted and soft, catching the edges of the ice crystals in the air and turning the atmosphere into a shimmering haze of diamond dust. This dust, known as parhelia, creates halos around the sun, bright spots of light that look like ghostly companions flanking the dying fire of the day. It is a spectacle of quiet beauty, a silent celebration of the atmosphere and the cold, and it marks the beginning of the long sleep for the continent. The wind begins to drop, and the air grows even stiller, as if the land itself were holding its breath in anticipation of the dark. During these final days of light, the mountains that ring the plateau seem to grow taller, their jagged peaks silhouetted against the glowing sky. These are the Transantarctic Mountains, a range that has stood for millions of years, watching the ice grow and recede like a slow tide. Their rocks are dark and ancient, scarred by the wind and the frost, yet they possess a rugged, silent dignity in the valleys between the peaks. There are places where no snow falls, dry valleys where the wind has scoured the ground bare to the stone. Here the earth is a mosaic of browns and grays, a stark and beautiful reminder of the continent's hidden bones. The air in these valleys is so dry that nothing decays. A piece of wood or a seal that wandered inland centuries ago remains perfectly preserved, a testament to the timeless nature of the cold. Walking through these valleys is like walking through a cathedral of stone and wind, where every sound echoes with the weight of the ages. We return to the ice, feeling the transition as the last sliver of the sun dips below the horizon. The light does not vanish all at once, but lingers in a long, drawn-out dusk that can last for days. The stars begin to emerge, one by one piercing the deepening blue of the sky with their cold, steady needles of light in the absence of the sun. The stars seem closer here, more vibrant and numerous than anywhere else on Earth. The Milky Way stretches across the dome of the sky like a river of silver mist, its billion lights reflected in the tiny crystals of the snow below. There is no light pollution here, no glow from distant cities to dim the brilliance of the cosmos. It is just you, the ice, and the infinite reaches of the universe. A moment of profound connection that is both humbling and deeply comforting. The cold deepens, but it is a dry, clean cold that feels like a heavy blanket, settling over the landscape and hushing every remaining sound. In this darkness, the aurora australis begins its nightly performance. It starts as a faint, greenish glow on the horizon, a curtain of light that ripples and sways as if caught in a celestial breeze. Slowly, the colors intensify, shifting from emerald to pale violet and sometimes a delicate, dusty rose. The lights do not flicker. They flow, moving with a liquid grace that defies description. They dance over the silent mountains and the vast, sleeping plateau, a silent symphony of energy and magnetism. To watch the aurora is to witness the Earth's conversation with the sun, a visual representation of the invisible forces that protect and sustain our world. The light reflects off the snow, tinting the white landscape in shades of neon green and ghostly purple, creating a dreamscape that feels far removed from the everyday world of grass and trees. As we stand in the heart of this luminous dark, we feel the great weight of the ice beneath us, a silent giant that has rested here for eons. The ice is not dead. It is a living, breathing part of our planet, regulating the temperatures of the oceans and the rhythms of the winds. It is a stabilizer, a quiet anchor in the spinning world. Knowing it is here in its vast and frigid majesty brings a sense of order and peace. The continent does not ask for anything. It simply exists, a monument to the power of stillness and the beauty of the extreme. The snow continues to fall, thin and dry, adding another microscopic layer to the archive. Another page to the book of the world's history. Each flake is a quiet promise that the cycle will continue, that the ice will remain, and that the memories of the sky will be kept safe for all time. The shadows on the plateau are now deep and permanent, and the air has reached a state of perfect, crystalline equilibrium. The small research stations are now islands of warmth in a sea of shadow, their lights twinkling like fallen stars. Inside, the rhythm of life slows even further. There is more time for reading, for quiet conversation, and for the simple pleasure of listening to the wind. The researchers become part of the landscape, their pulses slowing to match the deliberate pace of the polar winter. There is a profound sense of camaraderie in this shared isolation, a bond formed by the common experience of the great dark. They are the guardians of the world's memory, the quiet observers of the ice's long sleep. Imagine now the sound of your own breathing in this vast, quiet space. It is a soft, steady rhythm, a small and vital counterpoint to the immense silence of the plateau. With each breath, you feel more settled, more attuned to the stillness of the ice. The cold is no longer a force to be battled, but a presence to be respected, a quiet companion that brings clarity and calm. The world beyond the ice seems very far away. Its noise and hurry replaced by the simple, enduring reality of the snow and the stars. You are safe here, held in the cradle of the ancient ice, protected by the thousands of miles of emptiness that surround you. The ice remembers the sky, and now it remembers you, too, as a small and peaceful part of its long, white history. The aurora continues to shimmer overhead, its colors fading into a soft, monochromatic glow as the night reaches its deepest point. The stars remain steady, their light a constant presence in the dark. The plateau is a sea of silver and shadow, a place where the earth and the heavens meet in a silent embrace. There is nothing more to be done, no further distance to travel. We have reached the heart of the stillness, the place where time stands still and the world finds its rest. The ice is thick and solid, a foundation that will not be moved, a quiet strength that supports all the life that teems at the edges of the continent. Here at the center there is only peace, a deep and enduring quiet that fills every crack and crevice of the landscape. As we prepare to leave this place in our minds, we carry with us the feeling of the dry, cold air and the sight of the shimmering frost. We remember the blue of the deep ice and the grain of the dancing lights. But most of all, we carry the silence, a silence that is not empty, but full of the history of the world and the promise of the future. The ice will continue its slow, heavy journey toward the sea, and the snow will continue to fall, grain by grain, building the archive of the years. The continent will remain a white and shining sentinel at the bottom of the world, keeping its secrets and its stillness. The light of the aurora begins to dim, the curtains of color folding back into the velvet black of the sky. The stars seem to pull back, their brilliance softening into a gentle, distant shimmer. The plateau is now a world of pure shadow, a place of total and absolute rest. The wind has fallen away completely, leaving a void that is filled only by the sound of the earth's own quiet pulse. It is a moment of perfect equilibrium, where the cold and the dark and the ice all exist in a harmonious whole. You can feel yourself sinking into this stillness, your thoughts slowing down to match the pace of the falling snow. We drift now back toward the edges of the continent, passing over the silent mountains and the frozen valleys once more. The landscape below is a blur of soft whites and deep grays, a peaceful tapestry woven by the wind and the cold. We move toward the coast, where the ice meets the sea, but the transition is gentle, a slow blending of the solid and the fluid. The ice shelves reach out into the water like long, cooling fingers calming the waves and hushing the sound of the surf. The ocean here is dark and still, its surface covered by a thin skin of new ice that crackles softly in the swell. The life that dwells here, the seals, the whales, the tiny krill, is all tucked away in the deep, moving in a slow, rhythmic dance that mirrors the turning of the stars. The journey is complete, and the continent is left to its long, beautiful sleep. The ice remembers the sky, the wind remembers the mountains, and the world remembers the peace of the white desert. As you settle deeper into your own rest, imagine the vastness of the plateau stretching out in all directions, a quiet and eternal kingdom of frost. The air is still, the light is soft, and the ice is steady. Everything is as it should be, held in the gentle, frozen grip of the Antarctic night. The silence is a blanket, the cold is a comfort, and the dark is a soft, welcoming room where you can finally let go. The breathing of the world continues, slow and sure, a lullaby of ice and stars that carries you down, further and further into the deep, blue quiet of sleep.